gotta get it done.
Are the Warriors fumbling Steph?
Your franchise gets a guy like this once in a lifetime. You mortgage every piece of future you have. Go for it.
This man played at an all-NBA level last season.
Things have suddenly taken an even more unbelievable turn, and you won't believe how quickly everything changed. As many of you remember, on June 29, Draymond Green declined his fully guaranteed $27.7 million player option. That wasn't a small gamble either. It meant walking away from guaranteed cash because the Warriors were chasing what they believed was a franchise-changing opportunity. Then, just 30 days later, only 4 days after that dream completely fell apart, the entire story flipped. On July 28th, the Warriors rewarded Draymond with a brand new contract. And here's the twist that has everyone talking. It was the exact same length and the exact same $27.7 million value, handed to a player who has openly joked that all the fines throughout his career have made it feel like he doesn't actually keep much of the money he earns.
It's $100,000. As hard as we work to accumulate wealth, and then you get fined the way we get fined, it's actually not set up for us to be wealthy after we're done.
And trust me, I'm never retiring that clip. You'll probably keep seeing it pop up in future videos because it's just too perfect for moments like this. If you missed where it came from, it was featured in my breakdown of NFL and NBA players arguing they aren't paid enough, and I'll leave that video on the end screen because it's absolutely worth watching after this one. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn, and you won't believe what's missing from Draymond Green's new contract. One key layer of protection that he had every reason to expect simply isn't there. And the reason behind that missing safeguard tells you everything you need to know about how this organization handles the players who have sacrificed the most for it. In my previous video, I argued that the Golden State Warriors had essentially stopped prioritizing Steph Curry. Some of you completely agreed with that take, while others thought I was exaggerating. Then, everything changed over the next 72 hours. A quiet agreement behind the scenes suddenly came to light, and no matter how it ended, there was always a hidden catch built into it. The franchise itself, through one of its own beat writers, practically admitted it's comfortable staying exactly where it is instead of pushing for something bigger. And honestly, if I were Steph Curry sitting in that locker room today, the conversation I'd be asking for would probably sound something like this.
What's going on, everyone? If you missed my previous breakdown, here's the quick version. In that video, we talked about why the Golden State Warriors appeared to be quietly preparing for life after the greatest player in franchise history. Their strategy was to chase superstar talent without fully committing the financial price that usually comes with it. At the same time, they were protecting a long-term blueprint centered around the summer of 2027, even openly signaling that their focus was shifting toward building the next era once Steph Curry's time eventually comes to an end. I also explained that everything really points toward August 29, the day Steph Curry becomes eligible for a contract extension. If you haven't watched that video yet, I'll leave it on the end screen because I genuinely believe it's one of the biggest stories of the entire offseason. But since that video went live, 3 major developments have unfolded, and somehow each one has made this situation look even worse. So let's break it down step by step. First, we have to talk about Draymond Green, because Anthony Slater's latest ESPN report completely changes the way this entire story has been viewed. It turns out Draymond's decision to decline his $27.7 million player option wasn't simply a leap of faith in the Warriors organization. According to Slater, there was already an understanding between Draymond and the front office before he opted out, with a plan prepared for either possible outcome. If LeBron James joined the Warriors and extra cap space became necessary, Draymond would accept less money up front in exchange for a multi-year contract that provided long-term security. If LeBron chose not to come, the Warriors would simply return the exact same one-year $27.7 million contract that Draymond had walked away from, which is exactly what happened on Tuesday afternoon. So credit where it's due, his loyalty was genuine because he still risked guaranteed money based on an uncertain outcome. But here's the part you really need to pay attention to, because this is where the story becomes much more interesting. Under league rules, Draymond would normally have been entitled to an implicit no-trade clause with this type of contract. However, according to Slater, he agreed to waive that protection and instead kept his 15% trade kicker as part of the final agreement. Right now, the Warriors may not be actively shopping Draymond Green, but they clearly wanted to preserve maximum flexibility if a future deal ever presents itself. When you step back and examine the entire structure, one thing becomes obvious. If LeBron arrived, Draymond gained long-term security. If LeBron stayed away, he got his money back but remained fully tradable. That means he walked away without no trade protection while carrying a trade kicker that could actually make future transactions easier during the same offseason his name had already surfaced in trade rumors. No matter which scenario played out, both paths ultimately left Draymond Green in a more movable position. And don't forget, this is the very same organization that seriously explored potential Draymond Green trade scenarios around last season's trade deadline, which makes the interview you're about to see even more revealing.
At 13.5, but if it does, what a fucking run it's been.
Here's the part that really stands out. The long-term security was only on the table in the version of the story where LeBron James actually joined the Warriors. After 14 seasons, 4 championships, and everything Draymond Green has poured into this franchise, the final contract still included a built-in escape hatch that heavily favored the organization. To be fair, the handshake agreement wasn't completely one-sided. That 15% trade kicker carries legitimate value, and Draymond has repeatedly said he can't imagine wearing another team's jersey, while a 1-year contract also gives him the freedom to hit the market next summer if everything falls apart. So, yes, there's logic behind the decision, but when a partnership has lasted 14 years and the paperwork still makes it easier for the franchise to move you whenever it chooses, that contract quietly reveals who truly holds the power. Now let's get to the second major development, because this is where the bigger picture starts coming together. Remember the Warriors' 2027 master plan that I broke down in my last video? Take a close look at every move they've made this offseason, because they all seem to point toward that exact strategy. Draymond Green received only a 1-year deal. Kristaps Porzingis returned on a 2-year, incentive-loaded contract worth up to $40 million with an exit built into the structure. De'Anthony Melton also came back, and according to the reporting surrounding Draymond's contract, the Warriors intentionally chose a higher 1-year salary over a cheaper multi-year agreement for one very specific reason. They're keeping their financial books as flexible as possible for a massive pursuit in the summer of 2027. And with Nikola Jokic's name already being connected to that offseason, the direction becomes even more interesting. At this point, it really looks like the Warriors are following the exact roadmap I outlined in my previous breakdown. Draymond's new contract pushes the team above the first tax apron, meaning the remaining roster spots will likely be filled with veteran minimum contracts. Think about what that really means. A 37-win, 45-loss team is essentially capped out, yet it's choosing to bring back nearly the same core instead of making major changes. And you don't have to rely on my interpretation alone. Even ESPN's reporting paints a very similar picture. Here's how the Warriors' own beat writer described the mindset inside the organization.
Room really for some minimums left. They're bringing a lot of it back together. Bringing Draymond back on the 1-year deal that they prioritized, the partnership between Draymond and trust in management, but also management's desire to keep that flexibility. Would have gotten a no-trade clause. The Warriors did not give them that, so that they want the ability to make moves in season, make moves, in free agency. Also, they're just fine running back this kind of older 37-win core. And I talked to Steve Kerr, said to me on the LeBron front that I didn't even realistically think we were in the running. It's just that everyone kept saying we were. It never seemed serious to me despite all the reports. So they didn't make any big swing trades, and they would have loved to have him either on the minimum or a mid-level exception. This just kind of is their statics.
Honestly, in all my years covering the NBA, I can't remember seeing another franchise with a once-in-a-generation superstar in this position. Steph Curry is entering the final guaranteed year of his contract while continuing to perform at an elite level and extend his championship window, yet the Warriors are openly signaling through their own reporting that they're perfectly comfortable sitting outside the true title race. That alone should have every fan asking questions. What makes it even more surprising is Steve Kerr's explanation. Kerr said that sometimes the smartest move for the future is actually not making a move at all. But that's an interesting stance coming from someone who reportedly considered stepping away from coaching before deciding to return so he could finish this journey alongside the current core. That's exactly why his emphasis on protecting the franchise's future feels so unexpected. According to Tim Kawakami, ownership is already focused on building the next Warriors team after Steph Curry. Meanwhile, reports from Murdock suggest the front office is already worried about what life looks like once Curry is gone. And now the head coach is defending an uneventful offseason because of long-term planning. When you put all those comments together, every message coming out of the organization seems to hint at a future where Steph Curry may not even be part of the equation. The bigger concern is that the Warriors haven't exactly built a flawless track record when it comes to rebuilding through the draft. Passing on LaMelo Ball for James Wiseman and selecting Jonathan Kuminga over Franz Wagner are decisions that still spark debate among fans today. Sure, Trayce Jackson-Davis has shown encouraging flashes, but so far that's largely based on Summer League performances rather than a full body of NBA work. And now, this entire situation has grown so noticeable that even the national media has started paying close attention.
Be planning his exit strategy. Over the last 4 years, the Warriors have been in the play-in tournament. And guess what? They're going to be a play-in tournament team again. And so if you're Steph Curry going on the age of 39, you can't waste any more time hoping and banking that Mike Dunleavy is going to get it right to make sure that you're able to compete for a title.
Steph Curry is not replaceable. This isn't coming around again. Absolutely do whatever I have to. We saw this at the end of the LeBron era in Cleveland. Dan Gilbert decided once Kyrie Irving wanted it out, they got this really valuable Nets pick, member in trade from Boston, and there was the opportunity to go get LeBron more help once Kyrie Irving left. And Dan Gilbert said, we are not going to be left high and dry if LeBron decides to leave again. We are going to keep that pick. We are going to make sure that we're prepared for the post-LeBron future. Well, guess what? LeBron did leave, partly because he didn't have that extra bit of help. Remember, he's looking at J.R. Smith like this, during the 2018 finals because they never went and gotten him anyone else. They were more attached to keeping that pick. Because they did that, he did leave. You know what? That pick didn't help them at all. He needs to stay in Golden State. I'd love to see him finish his career there, but I want to see them get him more help. There's just no question that he deserves that. And whatever post-Curry future you think you're planning for, I promise it won't be as good as right now could be with Steph Curry if you got more.
Now, here's the third development, and this one might be the biggest twist of them all. If you watched my recent video about LeBron James, you probably remember me touching on this briefly. But after Shams revealed what really happened, the entire conversation changed. According to his report, the Golden State Warriors actually had a legitimate opportunity to acquire Jaylen Brown, and then chose to walk away from the deal. That revelation completely changes how you view everything they've done this offseason, because it wasn't a case of having no options. They had a chance to make a franchise-altering move, yet they decided not to pull the trigger. And when you connect that decision to everything else we've already discussed, it starts looking less like bad luck and more like a deliberate strategy that could define the rest of Steph Curry's championship window.
Could have gotten in the Jaylen Brown sweepstakes if they wanted to give up 4 first-round picks-ish in that range. They decided not.
We covered this in much greater detail in my LeBron video, including which teams the Boston Celtics approached with Jaylen Brown and what every franchise gave up by passing on the opportunity. But if you missed that breakdown, here's the quick version. Back in February, the Warriors were engaged in trade discussions with the Celtics. Boston's asking price reportedly centered around Jimmy Butler, along with roughly 4 first-round picks from Golden State. The Warriors ultimately decided to pass on that proposal. And honestly, I actually understood that decision at the time, because the entire situation looked completely different back then. In February, there was still speculation that LeBron James could eventually leave the Lakers, but nothing close to a guarantee. Most people expected him to remain in Los Angeles, making that Warriors gamble incredibly risky. Under that scenario, Golden State would have been trading Jimmy Butler and 4 valuable first-round picks simply to land Jaylen Brown, with no clear path to significantly improving the roster afterward. Nobody could have realistically predicted that LeBron James would eventually join the Philadelphia 76ers on a veteran minimum contract. Back in February, that possibility would have sounded almost impossible.
That's exactly why I gave the Warriors credit for rejecting the original deal, because they would have been sacrificing 4 extremely valuable first-round selections, many of which could shape the franchise after Steph Curry's era comes to an end. In return, they'd receive Jaylen Brown, who wasn't even guaranteed to sign a long-term extension with the organization. That's a massive gamble. Even if your core became Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Jaylen Brown, and a roster filled mostly with veteran minimum contracts, you're probably only improving around the edges. At best, you're still looking like a play-in team rather than a true championship contender. And to be clear, that's not what I criticize the Warriors for. My issue has always been what happened afterward. Mike Dunleavy Jr. never seriously revisited those trade discussions once the offseason changed the entire landscape. Then we saw what Boston actually accepted for Jaylen Brown in the end. Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. Looking at that package, it's hard not to wonder if Golden State could have topped it. They already showed a willingness to offer Jimmy Butler and first-round picks, and there's a strong argument that their draft assets would have been even more attractive because they could convey sooner than Philadelphia's. On paper, it feels like an opportunity they could have won. And here's what makes the story even more interesting. The reporting actually lines up with that viewpoint. According to Logan Murdock of The Ringer, the February negotiations collapsed because the Warriors' front office couldn't reach an organizational consensus that Jaylen Brown was the player they wanted leading the franchise after Steph Curry's era. Think about that for a second, because it's incredibly revealing. Instead of evaluating how much Jaylen Brown could help Steph Curry compete for another championship right now, they were judging him almost entirely through the lens of what happens once Curry is gone. In other words, they measured a potential co-star for today's roster using standards built for tomorrow's team. And that's exactly where the next twist comes in, because Shams later revealed what really happened once June arrived.
Last month, the Celtics approached the Warriors on a deal that would have sent 4 first-round picks to Boston for Jaylen Brown, but they passed on that deal. LeBron James and Anthony Davis were their target.
Then another major detail surfaced. According to the reporting, Boston didn't just float an idea. They arrived with a complete trade framework that even solved Golden State's salary issues. Slater also reported that the package would have required the Warriors to include the number 11 overall pick. That selection eventually became Yaxel Lindenberg, who went on to win Summer League MVP. So when you strip everything else away, the decision essentially becomes Jaylen Brown or Yaxel Lindenberg, Jimmy Butler, and 3 first-round picks. The Warriors chose to keep Yaxel. And to be fair, let's give the young man his credit. Winning Summer League MVP is no small accomplishment, and if he develops into a legitimate star, history could absolutely prove the Warriors right while making this entire criticism look completely wrong. But if he tops out as a solid role player instead of a franchise-changing talent, then Golden State will have passed on an All-NBA wing not once, but twice, just to see how that gamble played out. That's an enormous risk when the price is the final championship-caliber years of Steph Curry's career. And maybe the most frustrating part of all is that it doesn't seem like Steph Curry ever had much of a voice in the process. Now, I already know what some people are probably thinking. Mike, didn't you just criticize Mike Dunleavy Jr. for failing to revisit Jaylen Brown talks, even though the Warriors discussed essentially the same trade again during the NBA draft? That's a fair question, but here's where the context changes everything. The version of the deal presented around draft time came before the entire market shifted. At that point, Giannis Antetokounmpo was still with the Milwaukee Bucks, and Boston was reportedly focused on pursuing him, meaning Jaylen Brown's trade value hadn't dropped yet. Once Giannis's situation changed and the landscape around the league shifted, the Warriors had another opportunity to reopen negotiations under completely different circumstances. Imagine Golden State calling Boston back and saying, "We'll keep Yaxel Lindenberg, but we'll offer Jimmy Butler plus 2 first-round picks for Jaylen Brown instead." That's the conversation I believe never happened, and in my opinion, that's where Mike Dunleavy Jr. made his biggest mistake, not recognizing that Jaylen Brown's market had changed and adjusting accordingly. Then you add the LeBron James angle and the entire picture becomes even more revealing. According to Anthony Slater, the Warriors reached out directly to LeBron's camp to find out what move would convince him to commit, but no clear demand ever came back.
Even so, league sources indicated there were strong hints that a blockbuster addition could have changed everything. Everyone knew Anthony Davis was the name most closely connected to LeBron, yet Golden State never seriously pushed to make that deal happen. The organization wasn't willing to part with Jimmy Butler, valuable draft picks, or commit to the extension Anthony Davis reportedly wanted. Slater's reporting also highlighted an incredible pattern. The Warriors have pursued LeBron James 3 different times over the last 3 years, yet this latest attempt never seemed to carry genuine belief that it would actually happen. That's why the bigger takeaway isn't just about one missed trade, it's that the Warriors continue telling fans they're searching for major upgrades while repeatedly refusing to pay the full price those upgrades require. This week, they stopped hiding that philosophy. Which brings us right back to the date that's looming over everything, August 29th. That's when Steph Curry becomes extension eligible, and according to Shams Charania on the Stephen A. Smith Show, negotiations are fully expected to begin around that time, whether it's for a 1-year extension or a 2-year deal. Shams also made it clear he hasn't sensed any desire from Steph to leave Golden State. Steph himself has echoed that same feeling over the years, telling Logan Murdock that his dream has always been to finish his career wearing only one NBA jersey. And Murdock has said Curry has consistently shut down the idea of leaving every time he's been asked. So yes, the expectation is that Steph stays. The expectation is also that he signs. But the real story isn't whether he'll sign, it's what the contract actually looks like. Listen carefully to how Shams framed the possibilities, 1 year or 2. That's the exact crossroads I pointed out earlier. A 1-year extension keeps the Warriors' financial flexibility completely intact for the summer of 2027, when they're reportedly hoping to chase a superstar like Nikola Jokic. A 2-year extension would make Steph Curry the lone exception to a long-term blueprint the front office has already applied to nearly everyone else, including Draymond Green after 14 years beside him. Draymond's contract already showed exactly how this front office structured deals when protecting the long-term plan comes first. In just over a month, Steph Curry will be handed his own contract, and honestly, the number of years written on that document may end up telling the entire story. Before we wrap this section up, though, I want to show you one more comment from Anthony Slater, because if it actually plays out, it could completely change the Warriors' outlook, even if, personally, I think it's a bit of a long shot. When Anthony Slater was asked whether Golden State still plans to make another major move for Steph Curry, this was his response.
They are the first couple months. The healthier Steph Curry looks, the more likely it is that maybe this front office can be convinced to trade to upgrade the...
So according to that logic, any real help comes with conditions. The Warriors are essentially asking a soon-to-be 38-year-old Steph Curry to carry a 37-win team back into contention, stay healthy through the grind, and only then might they consider investing more around him. Think about that for a second. Steph has to prove this roster deserves reinforcements instead of the organization proving it deserves Steph's loyalty. So where do I stand after everything we've learned? In my last video, I said the Warriors have started treating Steph Curry's loyalty like something they'll always have, no matter what. And over the past few days, the reporting has only reinforced that belief. Draymond Green risked guaranteed money to help the franchise chase a bigger dream, yet all he received in return was essentially the same contract with key protections removed, and an easier path for the team to move him if necessary. Meanwhile, Steph Curry's championship timeline took a back seat during the Jaylen Brown discussions, even while Steph himself was reportedly making calls to recruit LeBron James to Golden State. Then, Logan Murdock's reporting finally helped explain why all of this keeps happening. Since Bob Myers stepped away in 2023, Joe Lacob has reportedly taken on even greater control over basketball decisions. According to Murdock, Lacob's biggest concern is what happens after Steph Curry eventually retires, and that's one of the primary reasons the organization refuses to sacrifice future draft assets for immediate help. Now connect that with what Tim Kawakami reported earlier. Kawakami described ownership's desire to build the next Warriors team after Steph, while Murdock explained the fear of life without Steph. Put those two ideas together, and the entire strategy suddenly makes a lot more sense. The same executive is being driven by both ambition and fear at the exact same time. Unfortunately, the cost of balancing those two priorities appears to be the remaining prime years of the greatest player the franchise has ever had. And this pattern didn't suddenly appear overnight either. Over the past several years, the Warriors have been linked to pursuits involving Lauri Markkanen, Paul George, a Kevin Durant reunion, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and even multiple attempts to land LeBron James. Time after time, they chased blockbuster moves but stopped short when it came to paying the full price that usually closes those deals. At some point, you have to ask whether this organization rewards loyalty or simply assumes it will always be there. They continue benefiting from the trust their stars have shown, yet the contracts and decisions always seem structured to preserve the team's flexibility first. If someone wants to call this patience, I see it differently. The Warriors have shown patience before. That's how they developed Steph Curry through his early injury struggles. What we're watching now feels less like patience and more like a franchise so focused on preparing for life after Steph that it's risking the years while he's still here. My prediction from the first video hasn't changed, but I'll take it one step further. I still believe Steph signs an extension around August 29th, and the number of years on that contract will reveal everything about the organization's true priorities. If it's a 2-year extension, then Steph Curry really is the exception to the long-term plan. If it's only 1 year, then even the greatest player in franchise history is being placed into the exact same blueprint as everyone else. So step back and look at where all this reporting has left us. A handshake agreement that protected the organization no matter how things unfolded. A head coach defending an inactive offseason in the name of a future he may not even coach. The national media openly questioned the franchise's direction. A front office evaluating an all-NBA talent based more on the post-Steph era than the current championship window, while Steph himself was trying to recruit stars. And now, a 38-year-old legend sits just weeks away from extension talks, with any meaningful roster help seemingly dependent on whether he can once again carry a team the Warriors still haven't fully committed to fixing.
Happy with Steph. He does not want out. I can say that with 100% confidence. He will not be moved during the 26-27 season. I don't see any scenario in which he leaves, and it's his franchise and will forever be his.
Now, I want to hear from you. Head down to the comments and let me know your thoughts. Do you believe the Warriors are making the right decisions as the Steph Curry era winds down? Or do you think they're wasting the final years of an all-time great? Drop your opinion below because this is one of the biggest debates surrounding the franchise right now, and I'm genuinely interested to see where you stand.